Imagine finding a tiny baby abandoned in the trash, but what if the truth about the baby could change your life? Life has always been a harsh and unrelenting struggle for Caroline Harper, a 34-year-old widow living in a small, crumbling apartment on the outskirts of the city. Caroline works tirelessly as a cleaner in local shops and offices. Her days are long, grueling, and filled with physical labor, but they barely cover the essentials. Despite her challenges, Caroline carries a quiet determination. Every penny she earns goes toward feeding herself and maintaining the fragile roof over her head. But poverty isn't the only burden Caroline carries. The pain of losing her husband, who died unexpectedly 3 years ago, still lingers in her heart. Her dreams of starting a family were shattered by his passing, leaving her lonely and with little purpose beyond survival. Late one evening, as Caroline finishes her shift at a nearby bakery, the cold wind stings her cheeks as she walks home. Her path takes her through a dark alley, a shortcut she reluctantly uses to save time. The smell of garbage and faint sounds of the city surround her. It's there, in the flickering glow of a broken street lamp, that she hears a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a baby's cry. Caroline stops in her tracks, her heart pounding as the faint cries grow louder. With hesitant steps, she follows the sound to a cluster of overturned trash bins near the wall of an abandoned building. She moves closer, her breath visible in the icy air, and spots something moving inside a dirty blanket. Gently peeling back the layers, she gasps. There, nestled amidst discarded cans and food wrappers, is a tiny baby, its face red from crying, its fragile body wrapped in tattered fabric. The child looks no older than a few days. For a moment, Caroline is frozen, overwhelmed by the impossibility of the situation. Who would abandon a baby like this? The thought stabs at her heart. Without a second thought, she scoops up the child, cradling it close to her chest to protect it from the cold. The baby's cries soften, as though sensing the warmth and safety of her embrace. She looks around, desperately searching for signs of someone who might have left the infant, but the alley is deserted. With no one to turn to, she hurries home, her thoughts racing. Who is this baby? Why was it left to die? And what on earth is she going to do now? Caroline reaches her small, run-down apartment, fumbling with her keys as the baby begins to whimper again. She pushes open the creaky door and quickly lays the infant on her worn-out couch, grabbing an old blanket to swaddle it more securely. Her hands tremble as she inspects the baby, taking in its tiny hands and fragile features. Despite the grime and the rough fabric wrapped around it, the child appears unharmed. She notices something peculiar, a small, delicate bracelet around the baby's wrist. It's made of gold, etched with an unfamiliar symbol and what appears to be initials. Caroline's mind races with questions, but there's no time to dwell. The baby's cries become more urgent, and she realizes it's likely hungry. Her kitchen cupboard holds little, just a loaf of stale bread and a can of soup. Frantically, she heats some milk on the stove, pouring it into an old bottle she had saved from her days of hoping for a child. The baby drinks greedily, calming as it finishes. Caroline watches, her heart aching. She has no idea who this baby is or why it was abandoned, but one thing is clear. This child has entered her life for a reason she cannot yet understand. The night passes fitfully. Caroline struggles to sleep, her mind consumed by the mystery of the baby. Every few hours, she checks on the child, who now rests peacefully in a makeshift crib made from a laundry basket and some soft towels. She can't help but feel a strange bond forming, one she never expected, yet fills a void in her heart she thought would remain forever empty. The next morning, Caroline knows she can't keep the baby a secret. Her moral compass demands she report the incident, but fear gnaws at her. What if the authorities take the child away? What if the baby ends up in the same system that failed so many children she's known? To buy time, she decides to visit an old friend, Margaret Reed, who works as a nurse at the local clinic. Margaret is a woman in her 50s, kind but sharp, with a knack for uncovering truths. Caroline shares her story, her voice trembling as she explains how she found the baby and shows Margaret the mysterious bracelet. Margaret's expression shifts from concern to intrigue. "This bracelet," she says, examining it closely, "it's not ordinary. This symbol, it might be a family crest. We need to find out more." Caroline's visit to Margaret sparks a cascade of revelations. Margaret, whose years of nursing had exposed her to people from all walks of life, confirms that the bracelet is no trinket from a pawn shop. "This could belong to a family of great wealth or influence," she says thoughtfully, running her fingers over the etching. "We should be careful. If the wrong people are looking for this child, it could put you in danger." Margaret suggests running a discreet medical checkup on the baby to ensure its health. As they work, the baby clutches Caroline's finger tightly, making her heart swell with an emotion she hasn't felt in years. Hope. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" she whispers to the infant. As Margaret gently examines the child, she notices a faint birthmark near its shoulder, an intricate pattern that seems too deliberate to be coincidental. "This mark," Margaret murmurs. "I've seen something like this before, but I can't remember where." They agree to keep the baby's presence under wraps for now, fearing the consequences of drawing attention too soon. Meanwhile, Caroline begins piecing together her own theories. Could this child belong to someone prominent? Why would they abandon it? Her questions multiply as she returns home, more determined than ever to protect the baby. Days turn into weeks as Caroline adjusts to her new reality. The baby, whom she names Lila, begins to thrive under her care. Despite her limited means, Caroline pours every ounce of love into Lila's well-being. She sells her last few valuable possessions to buy formula and clothes, juggling her cleaning jobs with sleepless nights of childcare. But Caroline's quiet life doesn't remain unnoticed. On a chilly evening, as she rocks Lila to sleep, she spots a black sedan idling at the corner of her street. Her stomach tightens with unease. The car has been there for 3 nights in a row. It's too clean, too polished to belong to anyone from her neighborhood. Desperate for answers, she reaches out to Margaret again. This time, Margaret has news. She's traced the symbol on the bracelet to an old estate tied to the Rowan family, one of the city's wealthiest dynasties. They've been involved in scandals before, Margaret warns. If this child belongs to them, there's more to this story than we realize. The name Rowan sends shivers down Caroline's spine. She remembers the tabloids from years ago, stories of opulence, power, and bitter family disputes. The Rowans owned vast properties and wielded influence in business and politics, but their name was also linked to tragedy. Caroline learns that the youngest Rowan son, Victor Rowan, mysteriously disappeared several years ago, leaving behind a cloud of speculation and whispers of betrayal. Caroline begins researching late into the nights, poring over old newspaper clippings and online archives. Every article paints the Rowans as a family, with layers of secrets. One photograph catches her eye, a picture of Victor Rowan as a young man, his arm around a woman with striking features. Her heart skips a beat. The woman looks eerily similar to Lila. Could this baby be connected to Victor? As Caroline digs deeper, strange things begin happening. Her mailbox is stuffed with blank envelopes, and she receives anonymous phone calls that end as soon as she answers. She feels the walls closing in, the weight of her decision to keep Lila growing heavier by the day, but when she looks into Lila's innocent eyes, she knows she can't give up on her. Margaret advises caution, urging Caroline to stay away from the Rowans until they have more information. "This is bigger than you think," Margaret warns. "If the Rowans abandoned this child, they might stop at nothing to keep it quiet." Caroline, however, feels a surge of defiance. She's no stranger to hardship, and she refuses to let Lila become another casualty of the powerful. She decides to visit the Rowan estate herself, but not before leaving a letter with Margaret, detailing everything she knows so far. "If anything happens to me, make sure Lila is safe," she pleads. The Rowan estate is a sprawling mansion surrounded by high gates and manicured gardens. Caroline waits until nightfall to approach, her heart pounding. She hides in the shadows, observing the house. Through a window, she sees a woman sitting in an ornate study, staring at the same bracelet Lila had been wearing. Suddenly, the woman looks up, as if sensing Caroline's presence. Their eyes lock for a brief moment before Caroline ducks away. She knows she's been seen. Caroline's encounter at the Rowan estate leaves her shaken. She rushes back home with Lila, her mind racing. Who was the woman in the study and why was she holding the bracelet? Caroline's fear deepens as she notices the black sedan parked near her home again, this time with its headlights off, cloaked in the darkness. The following day, she confides in Margaret about what she saw. Margaret is alarmed. "This isn't a coincidence," she warns. "The Rowans must know about Lila. But if they abandoned her, why are they watching you now?" They speculate about the woman in the mansion, whom Margaret identifies as Cecilia Rowan, the family's eldest daughter and the current matriarch after the death of her parents. Margaret suggests contacting a lawyer, but Caroline is hesitant. "What if they try to take her from me?" she whispers, clutching Lila protectively. Margaret reminds her, "If Lila truly belongs to them, we need to uncover why they left her in that trash heap. They owe you, and her, answers." Caroline decides to keep a low profile while gathering more evidence, but staying invisible proves nearly impossible. At her cleaning job, she notices a man in a tailored suit lingering in the lobby, pretending to read a newspaper. She sees him again when she's walking to the grocery store and later near the daycare where she briefly leaves Lila while working. It's clear someone is following her every move. One night, Caroline receives a knock at her door. Her heart pounds as she peers through the peephole. Standing there is a man in his late 30s, sharply dressed and exuding an air of authority. "Miss Caroline Ward?" he asks politely but firmly. She doesn't answer, her hand trembling as she grips the doorknob. The man slides an envelope under her door. "I work for the Rowan family," he says. "They would like to meet with you to discuss matters of mutual interest. It's in everyone's best interest to cooperate." Before she can respond, he walks away, disappearing into the night. Inside the envelope is a crisp letter embossed with the Rowan family crest. The message is simple but chilling. "We know about the child. Meet us tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the Rowan estate." Caroline feels trapped. The Rowans now know about Lila, and the invitation to their estate feels more like a summons than a request. She wrestles with her options, fearing for Lila's safety but knowing she can't run forever. Margaret encourages her to be cautious but agrees that this might be the only way to uncover the truth. "Just promise me you'll be careful," Margaret insists. The next evening, Caroline arrives at the Rowan estate, her nerves on edge. Lila stays with Margaret, who promises to keep her safe no matter what happens. Caroline clutches the letter tightly as the mansion's iron gates swing open, flanked by imposing security guards who escort her to the main entrance. Inside, the atmosphere is suffocating. The grandeur of the mansion is overwhelming, with gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls adorned with portraits of Rowan ancestors. Cecilia Rowan, the woman Caroline saw through the window, greets her in the lavish study. Cecilia is poised, her piercing gaze betraying no emotion as she gestures for Caroline to sit. Cecilia wastes no time. "You have something that belongs to us," she says coolly. Caroline stiffens but doesn't flinch. "If you're referring to the baby, I found her abandoned in the trash," she replies, her voice steady despite her fear. Cecilia's expression falters for a fraction of a second before she regains her composure. "That child is part of this family," she states, "but you have no idea what you've involved yourself in." Caroline presses for answers. "If she's part of your family, why was she left to die? Why didn't you protect her?" Cecilia hesitates, a shadow of pain flickering in her eyes. "There are complexities to this situation you can't understand," she says cryptically. She mentions Victor Rowan, her younger brother, but refuses to elaborate further. The child's existence puts this family in jeopardy. It's best for everyone if she's returned to us immediately. Caroline refuses, her voice shaking with emotion. You abandoned her once. How can I trust you won't do it again? Cecilia doesn't answer, but her silence speaks volumes. Before Caroline can push further, a man enters the room. His presence is commanding, and Cecilia visibly stiffens. Enough, Cecilia, he says sharply. Let me handle this. The man's piercing eyes meet Caroline's, and she knows this is Victor Rowan. Victor Rowan stands tall, his sharp features and intense gaze cutting through the tension in the room. He dismisses Cecilia with a wave, and though she hesitates, she eventually leaves, the sound of her heels echoing down the marble hallway. Caroline remains seated, her hands trembling in her lap as Victor takes a seat across from her. Let me start by apologizing. Victor begins, his voice deep and measured. The way my family has handled this situation was wrong. But you must understand, we were trying to protect the child and ourselves. Caroline's eyes narrow. Protect her? You left her to die. How is that protection? Her voice cracks with anger, but she refuses to back down. Victor leans forward, his expression softening. You don't know the full story, he says. That child, Lila, is my daughter. But her existence threatens the legacy of this family. If the press or our rivals discovered her parentage, it would destroy everything my parents built. Caroline is stunned. Your daughter, and you just threw her away like trash? What kind of father does that? Victor winces at her words, guilt flickering in his eyes. He explains that Lila was born out of an affair with a woman his family disapproved of, a woman they deemed unworthy of the Rowan name. When Lila's mother passed away during childbirth, his family intervened. They said it was best to eliminate the problem, Victor admits, his voice heavy with shame. I thought I had no choice. They convinced me it was the only way to save the family. Caroline's heart breaks for Lila, but her anger toward Victor and the Rowans remains. You had a choice, she snaps, and you chose to abandon your own child. Victor looks down, unable to meet her gaze. You're right, he whispers. I failed her, but now that I know she's alive, I want to make things right. Caroline shakes her head. You don't just get to walk in and claim her. She's not a pawn in your family's game. She deserves love, safety, and a life free from your twisted legacy. Victor's eyes meet hers, filled with a mix of desperation and determination. Help me then, he pleads. Help me fight my family. Together, we can give her the life she deserves. Caroline doesn't trust Victor's sudden change of heart. You had years to fight for her and you didn't. Why should I believe you now? She asks, her voice sharp with skepticism. Victor sighs. Because I've already started, he says. He reveals that he's been gathering evidence against Cecilia and other family members who orchestrated the plan to discard Lila. This isn't just about protecting Lila anymore. It's about exposing the truth and dismantling the toxic cycle my family has perpetuated for generations. Caroline remains wary. And what happens if you lose? What happens to Lila then? Victor hesitates, and for a moment, Caroline sees the weight of his internal struggle. If I lose, they'll come for her. But if we stand together, we might stand a chance. You're the only person who's ever cared for her without expecting something in return. That's why I need you. Caroline considers his words but remains conflicted. Victor's remorse seems genuine, but the stakes are too high. She thinks of Lila's bright smile and innocent laughter, the life they've built together. Can she risk it all by trusting the man who abandoned her? Before Caroline can respond, the study door bursts open. Cecilia storms in, her face twisted with rage. What are you doing, Victor? She snaps. You're putting everything at risk. Victor rises to his feet, his voice calm but firm. I'm protecting my daughter, Cecilia. something this family should have done from the beginning. Cecilia's laugh is cold and bitter. You think you can save her? The board will never allow it. You'll lose your inheritance, your position, everything. I don't care about the money or the power, Victor retorts. I care about her, and I won't let you or anyone else hurt her again. The siblings' argument escalates, their voices echoing through the mansion. Caroline watches in silence, torn between her distrust of the Rowans and her hope that Victor might truly be different. Suddenly, Cecilia turns to Caroline, her eyes blazing. You're making a mistake by staying here, she warns. You have no idea what you're up against. Caroline stands, her voice steady despite her fear. No, Cecilia. I think it's you who's underestimated me. Cecilia's sharp words hang in the air as she storms out of the study, slamming the door behind her. Caroline takes a deep breath, her mind racing. Victor turns to her, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. You didn't have to stand up to her, Victor says softly, but I appreciate it. I didn't do it for you, Caroline replies, her tone cool. I did it for Lila. She's the only one who matters. Victor nods, understanding her resolve. Then let's make sure she's safe. The two begin to strategize, poring over the documents Victor has collected. Among them are financial records, emails, and even a handwritten note from Cecilia outlining the plan to abandon Lila. This is enough to bring them down, Victor says, his voice steady with determination. But we need a way to protect Lila in the meantime. Caroline suggests going public with the story, exposing the Rowan family's actions to the media. If the world knows the truth, they won't be able to touch her, she argues. Victor hesitates. That would destroy the family name completely. Maybe it's time it was destroyed, Caroline counters. Your family built their legacy on lies and cruelty. It's time for a new beginning. Their conversation is interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside the study. Caroline's heart pounds as the door creaks open, revealing Lila standing there with wide, curious eyes. Mommy? She asks, clutching her teddy bear. Why are you yelling? Caroline rushes to Lila's side, scooping her up in a protective embrace. It's okay, sweetheart. We're just talking. Victor watches the tender moment, his expression softening. Lila, he says gently, kneeling to her level. I want you to know something. I'm your friend, and I'm going to make sure you're safe no matter what. Lila tilts her head, studying him with innocent curiosity. Okay, she says simply before burying her face in Caroline's shoulder. As Caroline carries Lila out of the room, she glances back at Victor. If you're serious about this, she says, her voice firm, then you'd better be ready to fight. The next day, the fight begins in earnest. Victor arranges a meeting with his family's board of trustees, a group of powerful individuals who control the Rowan Empire. Caroline accompanies him, her presence a silent challenge to the family's authority. The boardroom is an imposing space with a long mahogany table and walls lined with oil paintings of Rowan ancestors. Cecilia is already seated, flanked by several allies, her expression icy as she watches Victor and Caroline enter. Victor doesn't waste any time. He stands at the head of the table, his voice calm but commanding as he lays out the evidence against Cecilia and the others. This family has operated in the shadows for far too long, he declares. We've hurt innocent people, including my own daughter. It ends today. Cecilia scoffs, leaning back in her chair. You think these accusations will stick? You have no proof. Victor smirks, pulling out a folder and tossing it onto the table. Actually, I have plenty. Financial records, emails, and even your own handwritten confession. The room falls silent as the board members examine the documents. Whispers ripple through the group, and Caroline can see doubt creeping into their faces. But Cecilia isn't done yet. She rises to her feet, her voice dripping with venom. Even if this is true, you've just destroyed your own legacy, Victor. The Rowan name will be worthless. Victor steps closer, his voice unwavering. A name means nothing if it's built on pain and lies. I'd rather start over with nothing than continue this charade. The tension in the room is palpable as the board members begin to murmur among themselves. Caroline watches, her heart pounding as Victor's bravery starts to sway them. Finally, one of the older members clears his throat. "Victor is right," he says. "The Rowan family needs to change. If this is the cost, so be it." Cecilia glares at him, but it's clear she's losing her grip on power. Caroline feels a surge of hope. For the first time, it seems like justice for Lila is within reach. With the board's support secured, Victor wastes no time dismantling the toxic legacy of the Rowan family. He calls for an emergency press conference, stepping into the public eye to reveal the truth. Caroline stands in the crowd, holding Lila's hand tightly as the cameras flash and reporters shout questions. Victor steps up to the podium, his expression resolute. "For generations, my family has built its power at the expense of others. That ends today. I'm here to acknowledge our mistakes and take full responsibility. Most importantly, I want to protect those we've harmed, starting with my daughter, Lila." The crowd gasps at the revelation, and the cameras zoom in on Victor's determined face. Caroline feels a swell of emotion as she watches him take accountability, a rare and powerful moment for someone from his world. After the conference, Victor approaches Caroline and Lila, his face a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I meant every word," he says softly. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Caroline nods, her expression guarded but hopeful. "Actions speak louder than words, Victor. Let's see if you follow through." Meanwhile, Cecilia retreats into the shadows, her power effectively stripped away. The board has agreed to freeze her assets and remove her from any decision-making roles in the family business. For the first time, she's faced with the consequences of her actions, though Caroline suspects she's already plotting her next move. In the days that follow, Victor makes good on his promises. He works tirelessly to set up a trust fund for Lila, ensuring her future is secure. He also begins the process of transforming the Rowan Empire, shifting its focus to philanthropy and ethical business practices. Caroline, too, begins to rebuild her life. With Victor's help, she finds a new home for herself and Lila, a cozy apartment filled with warmth and love. Though she's cautious about letting Victor into their lives completely, she can't deny the changes she sees in him. As Caroline tucks Lila into bed one night, she feels a sense of peace she hasn't known in years. For the first time, the future feels bright. Victor continues to prove himself not just as a father, but as a man determined to right his family's wrongs. He spends more time with Lila, building a bond with her that grows stronger every day. They take trips to the park, where Victor teaches her how to fly a kite, and spend quiet evenings at Caroline's apartment, reading bedtime stories together. Caroline watches these moments with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. She knows Victor is trying, but part of her wonders if this transformation is too good to be true. Still, she can't deny the joy in Lila's eyes every time she sees her father. One evening, Victor surprises them with a visit to an art gallery he's purchased. The space is dedicated to showcasing works by underprivileged artists, a project he says was inspired by Caroline's resilience and creativity. "This is just the beginning," he tells her. "I want to use our resources to make a real difference." Caroline is touched by the gesture, though she hides her emotions behind a polite smile. "It's a good start," she admits, "but time will tell if it lasts." As Victor continues to win over Lila, Caroline begins to let her guard down. She agrees to let him take Lila on a weekend trip to the countryside, where they spend hours exploring nature and picking wildflowers. When they return, Lila is beaming, clutching a bouquet she insists is for her mother. "Did you have fun?" Caroline asks, crouching down to Lila's level. "Yes," Lila exclaims. "Daddy said we can go again soon." The word daddy catches Caroline off guard, but she doesn't correct Lila. Instead, she looks at Victor, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. All she sees is a man trying to make up for lost time. As the weeks pass, the tension between Caroline and Victor begins to ease. Though she's still wary of his intentions, she can't ignore the changes in him, or the bond forming between him and their daughter. Slowly but surely, they're building something resembling a family, one step at a time. Caroline begins to find herself again, reconnecting with her passions and rediscovering the strength she thought she had lost. With Victor's financial support, she starts a small nonprofit organization aimed at helping single mothers and their children. Inspired by her own struggles, the initiative focuses on providing housing, childcare, and career development resources to women in need. On the day of the nonprofit's launch, Victor attends the opening ceremony with Lila. He stands in the back, away from the cameras, watching as Caroline delivers an impassioned speech. "No one should have to go through what I went through," she says, her voice steady despite the emotions welling up inside her. "This is about creating a future where every mother and child has a chance to thrive, no matter their circumstances." As the crowd applauds, Victor catches Caroline's eye and gives her a small nod of approval. She offers a tentative smile in return, acknowledging the role he's played in helping her get to this point. Lila, meanwhile, runs up to Caroline and hugs her tightly. "You're amazing, Mommy," she says, her voice filled with pride. That night, Caroline sits on the balcony of her new apartment, reflecting on how much her life has changed. When Victor joins her, she doesn't immediately pull away. Instead, they sit in silence, the city lights twinkling below them. "I'm proud of you," Victor says finally. "What you've built, it's incredible." Caroline glances at him, her expression unreadable. "I never would have gotten here without Lila. She's my reason for everything." "And she's lucky to have you," Victor replies. "We both are." For the first time, Caroline allows herself to believe that Victor's transformation might be real. Though she's still cautious, she begins to see the man he could become, the man he's trying to be for their daughter. As the Rowan family empire shifts its focus to philanthropy, the ripple effects are felt across the community. Victor establishes a scholarship fund in Lila's name, providing opportunities for children from disadvantaged backgrounds to pursue their dreams. The foundation becomes a cornerstone of the Rowan legacy, a testament to Victor's commitment to change. Caroline, too, sees the impact of her nonprofit as it grows. Mothers and children begin to find stability and hope, their lives transformed by the resources and support her organization provides. Watching their progress fills her with a sense of purpose and fulfillment she's never known before. Meanwhile, Cecilia's attempts to regain her influence prove futile. Stripped of her wealth and power, she retreats from the public eye, her once mighty presence reduced to a cautionary tale of greed and manipulation. Victor, now fully immersed in his new role as a father and philanthropist, continues to make amends for his family's past. He becomes a regular presence in Lila's life, attending her school events and spending weekends together as a family. His relationship with Caroline remains complex, but they begin to find common ground, building a foundation of trust and mutual respect. One evening, as they sit together at Lila's school play, Caroline turns to Victor and says, "You've come a long way. I didn't think it was possible, but you've proven me wrong." Victor smiles, his expression soft. "I had a lot to make up for, and I'm not done yet." As the play ends and the audience erupts in applause, Lila runs off the stage and straight into Victor's arms. Caroline watches the scene with a mix of emotions, pride, relief, and a glimmer of hope for the future. For the first time in years, she feels like she's no longer fighting alone. Together, they've managed to create something new, a life filled with love, purpose, and the promise of a brighter. Months later, the transformation in both Caroline's and Victor's lives is undeniable. The nonprofit has become a beacon of hope in the community, with countless mothers and children benefiting from its services. Caroline's tireless dedication has earned her recognition as a leader and advocate for single mothers. She's invited to speak at conferences, her voice becoming a rallying cry for change. Meanwhile, Victor continues to balance his role as a father with his philanthropic efforts. The Rowan Foundation flourishes, supporting educational initiatives, community development, and sustainable programs for underprivileged families. Victor has traded power lunches and boardroom battles for heartfelt conversations and meaningful action. One day, Victor invites Caroline and Lila to an event at the newly constructed Rowan Community Center, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to providing resources for struggling families. As they arrive, Caroline is stunned by the scale of the project. "Is this?" she begins, her voice trailing off as she sees the plaque at the entrance. Inscribed on it are the words, "In honor of all the mothers who never gave up." Victor places a hand on her shoulder. "It's because of you, Caroline. Your strength, your determination. It inspired all of this." Tears well in Caroline's eyes as she looks at him. For the first time, she feels like the burdens of her past have been replaced by something far greater, a legacy of hope for others. Inside the center, children play in brightly colored rooms, mothers laugh and share stories, and staff members bustle around, ensuring everyone feels welcome. Lila is thrilled to see the space dedicated to children, eagerly running off to explore. Caroline watches her daughter with a mixture of pride and gratitude. Turning to Victor, she says, "You've done something incredible here. It's more than I ever imagined." Victor smiles, his gaze steady. "We've done it together." Though Caroline knows their relationship may never return to what it once was, she recognizes the value of the partnership they've forged. Together they've created a new beginning. Not just the final scene unfolds at a dinner hosted by Victor at his newly renovated home. Unlike the cold, imposing mansion it once was, the space is now warm and inviting, filled with life and laughter. The long dining table is surrounded by people from all walks of life, employees from Caroline's nonprofit, staff from the Rowan Foundation, and families who have benefited from their efforts. Caroline sits at one end of the table watching as Lila excitedly chats with other children. Victor, seated at the head, raises a glass to address the group. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight," he begins, his voice filled with sincerity. "This gathering isn't just about celebrating what we've accomplished. It's about recognizing the power of community, of coming together to create something greater than ourselves." Caroline watches him, impressed by the genuine passion in his words. For a man who once seemed unreachable, Victor has become a symbol of transformation and redemption. As the meal progresses, conversations flow easily, and laughter fills the room. It's a stark contrast to the lonely, hollow dinners Caroline once imagined Victor hosting in the same space. Now, his home has become a reflection of the life he's built, a life centered on connection and purpose. After dinner, Victor approaches Caroline as she stands on the balcony, gazing out at the city skyline. "This feels surreal," she admits, a hint of a smile on her lips. "I never thought we'd end up here." "Neither did I," Victor replies, his tone thoughtful. "But I'm glad we did." Caroline looks at him, seeing not the man he once was, but the man he's become. Though their journey has been fraught with challenges, it has also led to growth, healing, and an unshakable bond rooted in their shared experiences. As the night winds down, Victor, Caroline, and Lila share a quiet moment together, looking out at the stars. Lila rests her head on Caroline's shoulder, her small hand clasped in Victor's. In that moment, they are not a fractured family struggling to piece their lives back together. They are simply a family, imperfect but united by love, hope, and the promise of a better tomorrow.